My name's Jimmy Perrott, and I've been at Stony Hill since I've always been at Stony Hill, pretty much.
Right.
My parents did move around some when I was a small child, but I was saved in this church. I was about 12 years old, and I was doing a revival, and the preacher preached was the sermon, and then toward the end of the week, we used to go whole week revival, and then toward the end of the week, I felt this need to go down, so I did, and the baptism was over at the Neuse River. We used to have a baptizing hole over there. And it was, of course, it's late now, but.
So when you went down to so everybody went down to the lake.
Yeah.
Or it was just a river.
It was a river then. It was just a Neuse River, and the pastor would go out and shoot all the snakes.
Was that in the job description?
Yeah, I guess it must have been.
Okay, so you remember going, that was when you were 12 years old?
Yeah, I was about 12 years old when I joined the church here. And then when I was a teenager, Mr. Hester was the pastor then, and we went to Reese Crest, and of course they met at the community house in the beginning because they didn't have a church. And then they built a church, down on 98. And pretty much when Phyllis and I started dating, I came back to Stony Hill. Well, that was natural.
So she was here the whole time?
Yeah, she grew up here in this church, or her daddy grew up in this church, her parents, and Alberta, her sister, older sister, used to teach the Sunday school class, the primary class, and I remember when she taught that class, so that was been a long time ago.
Good. Okay, so tell me what you remember of the revival. You said you remember the children coming to the front. What else do you tell me about that?
Yeah, we used to have it. They won't carpeted in here, and we had brown benches and had a runner that ran down the middle. And the children would, the revival speaker would be so that had such a crowd here, the children would come down to the front and sit. And that was, that's been back in the early 50s. Mm-hmm. And that was a long time ago.
So they sat on the ground not to get a great seat necessarily, but just to save the seats for the adults.
Yeah, it was pretty much because it was packed full. It used to be, I remember when we first got air conditioning was back in the early 60s, which was a big thing then. Right. It was, and I remember the preacher was preaching revival, says, "Thank God for the air conditioning." That was, in the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, sounds great. What, let's see, so what else do you remember from the revivals? Do you remember any other aspects of the revivals?
I remember they used to go on and on. It seemed like it would last forever. It would, because the preacher would preach, and there would be at least 5 days of it. There would be a whole week.
Right. So when you say going on, you mean the services would last many days. Did the individual service last?
No, individual service only lasted about an hour. Okay. But they would go on for several days. Then people would be here. The same people would be here every night.
Right. And did they bring in guest speakers, or was it the pastor mostly?
It was usually a guest speaker for revival services.
Right.
The pastor would preach occasionally, but it was mostly guest speakers.
Right. And maybe you said you grew up in the church, so maybe you don't remember your first memory, but do you remember some of your early memories at Stony Hill?
I can remember being in Alberta's class, and I was a little bitty thing. My grandfather, Negre, gave this land like this with the other church I was on. That was back in that was in the '60s probably. I remember one thing that I did as a choir member. I recommended that we have a vote from Mr. Hester, and of course it passed, and he resigned. We didn't vote him out. No, anything. It was just a vote of confidence, and didn't want a vote of dismissal.
Okay.
And but there was not a lot of confidence in him, so he resigned.
About what year was that?
That would have been early '70s.
Okay.
Yeah, late '60s, early '70s.
And why do you mention him? Did he have a lot of impact on you?
He was here for about 13 years. So he did have a lot of impact. He was at the hospital when my kids were born. And of course, the oldest one now is 44, 45. So yeah, it's been a long time I've been in this church.
Yeah. Do you remember, you're mentioning Pastor Hester, anybody, and you mentioned Alberta, are those the main people who impacted you, or is there anybody else you think of that maybe had an impact on you?
I remember Buddy Patterson was here, but he was only here for a few years. Boy, it was a short. And then I used to go visiting with Al O'Quinn. We used to go to different, every week we would go visiting somebody. And we would do that regularly. He was an influence, but he was only here about 18 months. His wife got homesick for Georgia.
Okay, so you're mentioning pastors, and but Alberta wasn't a pastor, obviously.
No.
Any other members that you remember having a pretty big impact on you?
I guess Nolan probably had an impact on me as much as anybody did. He's always been Nolan. I mean, he's got older, but he's still the same as he was 50 years ago or 60 years ago. And so he's pretty much had an influence. And I remember Mr. Jones used to sit over there in the Amen Corner. But that was the Amen Corner then.
Okay, tell me about the Amen Corner.
The group of men used to sit over there and say Amen. And so that got to be called the Amen Corner.
Yeah, that's a good name. Do you remember some of the guys in the corner? You mentioned Mr. Jones. Who else was over there?
Oh, gracious, that was 60 years ago. I have a hard time remembering that.
So Nolan had an impact on you. Alberta had an impact on you. Any other people you think of?
Yeah, and in fact, Nolan and Alberta, when they got married, Phyllis was small, and she wanted to go with them on the honeymoon. she thought Alberta was mama. So Alberta pretty much was like a mama to her second mama. Mm-hmm. You know, her mother was, I guess, in her 40s when she was born. So Alberta was much younger and much more able to do stuff with her.
So you had people impact you, but you've served a lot of places in this church, a lot of different. You've been a deacon, you've been a music leader, you've been in the choir, you've taught Sunday school. What ways stand out in your mind in ways that you're sort of thankful that the Lord has let you have an impact on other people?
I think the music ministry was the biggest thing. I was probably in that position for close to 20 years. And that was a big thing. And of course, I've taught Sunday school pretty much for the whole time I was growing. I was young enough to do it. I'm not old. I'm too old now, but I used to do a lot of that. The new members class, the Sunday school class. I used to have a good time in this church. I've over the years, it's been a good time.
Okay, good. Yeah. So if somebody came to you and said, you know, I'm looking for a church home. I know you go to Stony Hill. You know, what would you tell them if they were saying, you know, if they asked you, you know, why should I consider joining the Stony Hill?
Well, I think the Stony Hill is probably the people, more than anything. The people, the acceptance of the people, the love of the people. The people have always been a group of together, and even when people came in, they just welcomed them in, and like Bud Martin and his family when they first came here. But it's been many years ago now, but they was well welcomed in. Paul and Robin, when they got married, when Paul started coming here, Paul was welcomed them into the church, and of course, he's been active ever since. And I think it's good to be a small church.
Yeah, good. I've run to the end of my questions. Any other memories about Stony Hill you think of that we start sometimes when you start a trip down memory lane, other memories come up.
Yeah, to try to think of memories. It's hard to do on a spot. But
if you were to, is there anything remarkable about Stony Hill? What makes it kind of different? And maybe you just answered that. Maybe you said it's the people. But is there anything that makes Stony Hill kind of different, at least in your own mind, from other churches that you?
I think Stony Hill, pretty much the people has been the key to the Stony Hill the whole time. It's been pretty much a thing of, you know, the people always came together, and when they had fellowship, they were always there. We used to have the homecoming meal was on the grounds. We had tables set up outside, and we could have several permanent tables. Of course, they're not there anymore. Of course, the trees have been cut down. It used to be attached to the trees, and it was nice there. It was.
Well, good. Well, that's the end of that's what I did. You want to? You did talk a little bit about. You don't have to go into any more detail, but any more you wanted to say about when you became a Christian? You said it was at a revival. Anything else stand out in your mind about that time? Maybe the sermon or what? I don't even
remember what the sermon was about or what the preacher preached about that day. I remember I was sitting closer to the back, and I was, of course, like children, and I used to be a wild child. I guess I am still wild, but some people would say I'm wild anyway. But I was listening to what he said, and it was making sense. And I think, well, that's me. And then I came.
And he was saying, what was he talking about that you said that's me?
I don't even remember what he was talking about at the time. That was 60 years ago. So, my memory is not that good anymore.
Okay. So you remember, was he talking about Jesus? I mean, do you remember anything he was saying about Jesus?
Hey, he was talking about Jesus, and he was talking about how the kids were wandering away, and they were doing all the different things. And, you know, it's not any different than it is now. It's just more of it. I think the biggest thing is that we see more of it, of course, of TV and radio and the media. We are more in tune to it than we didn't used to have that. That was not an option back then.